What's going on, guys? Austin Zaback here with another YouTube video, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about how I consistently make multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars per month wholesaling real estate. Now you might be watching the video and you're like, Austin, I have no idea what wholesaling even is. I have no idea who you are. Well, just real quick, wholesaling is essentially just kind of the art of getting a property under contract below market value and then turning around and assigning that contract to a cash buyer for a profit. So to be very clear, you're never actually owning the property, right? You're getting it under contract as the buyer, but before close of escrow, you're turning around and you're selling that contract essentially to a cash buyer with a little bit of arbitrage built in, so you make a little bit of profit. Now, I know I talk about making multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, anywhere from probably $200,000 to $300,000 a month, but I'm not showing you that to brag, okay? I wanna be very clear. I'm showing you that to inspire you, to show you that you don't need to have amazing credit or a bunch of money or a bunch of knowledge in the real estate industry ultimately to make a lot of money. I show you that because I'm like a normal average guy and I didn't get that good of grades in school and I didn't have a lot of money when I got into the real estate industry. And maybe similar to you watching the video right now, you know, I always watched shows like HGTV or Flip or Flop or Love It or List It or, you know, Chip and Joanna Gaines, right? And I was like, man, I really want to get into the real estate industry, but I never really understood how, right? And I never had the money. And of course, when I was 18, 19, 20 years old, I also didn't have the credit. I certainly didn't have the relationships, and I definitely didn't have the knowledge of the real estate industry. But I had a guy introduce me to the concept of wholesaling several years ago, and you know, I had an open mind about it, right? Oprah Winfrey says, your mind is like a parachute. If it isn't opened, it's not gonna work. So I took a look at it, of course, like anybody would do, and I said, probably what you're saying right now. I was like, well, how in the world can I get into the real estate industry without a lot of money, credit, all that, right? What I found was that it was actually really simple. I was essentially just doing a bunch of marketing. To put it even more simply, it wasn't even really like marketing. It was more or less just me looking for distressed properties on a consistent basis that were a little bit run down for whatever reason, and then ultimately putting those properties under contract, again, below market value, and making sure that there was enough meat left on the bone to sell that contract to an investor that's too busy to go out and find his own deals. Now, there are a ton of different ways where you can actually market to sellers that are in distressed situations and ultimately get those properties under contract, but for the purpose of today's video, I'm just gonna kind of intro you to kind of the overall concept and kind of just give you the blueprint, like the step-by-step outline of how you can actually do this, and then you can watch other videos on my channel where I really break down the individual topics. And by the way, if you haven't already, I would really appreciate it if you would take just a second, okay, and just smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm. So look, there's a lot of reasons why somebody would need to sell their property at a discount. Because what do most people do, right? Most Americans, typically, when they think of selling their property, they do what? They go out and they hire a real estate agent, which a real estate agent is gonna go ahead and they're gonna take the property and they're gonna list it on the MLS, which stands for the Multiple Listing Service. And only realtors have access to the MLS. And 99% of the time, a realtor is gonna try to get the most amount of money possible for the seller. The problem with that is that 9 times out of 10, or basically 10 times out of 10, only traditional buyers are looking for properties on the MLS through what they call a buyer's agent. And typically when a traditional buyer is looking to buy a property, they're using an FHA loan, a VA loan, or a conventional loan. And about 90% of the time, in order to get approved with an FHA, VA, or conventional loan, the property's gotta be in somewhat good condition. It's also got to appraise. And basically what an appraisal is somebody actually comes out and determines the value of the property. Of course, based on the market conditions, based on the location, based on other comparable properties in the neighborhood, based on the amount of work it needs, based on the condition it's in, and a bunch of other stuff. So basically, if a seller needed to sell a property in a hurry, which happens all the time because they're in divorce, they're in foreclosure, they lost their job, they're behind on their taxes, the house needs a ton of work, whatever the case is, they ultimately probably aren't gonna list that property with a real estate agent. So 9 times out of 10, they're either gonna try to list it for sale by owner, which most of the time doesn't end up working out, or they're gonna sell it to an investor that's gonna offer pretty much a cash offer. Now, obviously investors are always looking for a discount, right? Because an investor's in the business to make money. Because 9 times out of 10, an investor's buying the property to turn around and put it back on the market once they renovate the property. So of course, they're not a nonprofit, which means they need to make a profit, right? So they're buying the property at a discount, and then they're gonna put money into it in renovations, they're gonna fix everything up, and they're gonna turn around and they're gonna list it with a real estate agent and put it back on the market. And after all of their expenses, right, like renovation costs, holding costs, realtor costs, HOA costs, taxes, insurance, and all that good stuff, then they still want to ultimately make a profit at the end of the day. So really the key is to go ahead and get to the seller that needs to sell their property at a discount, lock that property up under contract, and then turn around and find a cash buyer, and you basically tell the cash buyer, like, look, I went out and did all of the heavy lifting for you, so you don't have to actually focus on finding the property. I did all of that work for you, and I'm just gonna sell you the property at a little bit of a higher price than I went out and got it for. And there's a couple of different things that we can talk about right now, but again, I wanna keep the video very, very simple so that if you're brand new to the real estate industry, you understand that, you don't need to go out and become a fix and flipper, become a real estate agent, or, do some crazy thing like Grant Cardone, like syndicating real estate or anything like that to ultimately get into the real estate industry. So what you're gonna do in a very simple nutshell is you're gonna get the property under contract with the seller with a due diligence or an inspection period, which basically means that when you put earnest money down on the property, that earnest money is fully refundable for whatever duration the due diligence or the inspection period actually is. In which case, you can go ahead and market that property to a cash buyer during that duration of time without any real risk. Now I'm gonna give you a couple of quick tips, a couple of quick hacks and things like that, so make sure you're taking notes, and of course, make sure you're just going ahead and smashing the like button. So look, there's a couple of different websites that I'll link down below on where you can find actual distressed sellers, right? And there's a lot of ways to do this. You can go ahead and you can drive for dollars using a link down below, and you'll get a free trial, and you can just essentially look for distressed properties, and then once you find one in real life, visualizing it, like literally looking at it, you can add it as a property to the application, and then you can go ahead and you can actually skip trace the owner, get the owner's information of that particular property. Then you can either call them, you can text them, you can send them like some sort of like postcard. There's pretty much a million ways you can reach out to the seller. And ultimately what you're gonna go ahead and do is you're gonna make them a cash offer, again, below market value. Now you're probably like, Austin, well, what is like market value? And of course, that's a phenomenal question, right? You can look at websites like Zillow, Redfin, Trulia, Realtor.com. There's all of these different websites, including a couple of the ones I've linked down below, of where you can find the potential ARV, which stands for the after repair value. Now the after repaired value is actually really simple, so don't overcomplicate it. It's basically just the value of that property once it's all fixed up and back on the market. Essentially, it's what a traditional like back-end buyer would pay for the property. What I'll typically do is I'll offer the seller a percentage of that total value. So let's just say the after repaired value of a property was $300,000. I'll typically offer a percentage of that total value. And again, it's gonna depend on where you live, what your labor costs are, what it costs, to get material, and a bunch of other variables. But basically, again, depending on where you live, I'll offer anywhere from 50 to 70% of that after repaired value. And obviously it's gonna depend on how much work the property needs and how much you're gonna actually have to put into it to ultimately get it to that point where it's worth that amount of money. And honestly, the 50 to 70% mark is a pretty good rule of thumb, even if you were like a fix and flipper, like if you were like Chip and Joanna Gaines, or you were like, somebody else on TV where you're like actually like flipping the property, that's typically a pretty good number. So again, like I said, you're gonna lock these properties up, and again, there's a lot of ways to do it, and you're gonna turn around and you're gonna flip that contract to a cash buyer. And you'll use what they call an assignment contract. The assignment contract is really simple. It basically just assigns your rights to that original contract to the cash buyer, and then you end up making the difference. So guys, that is pretty much how I consistently make, a couple of $100,000 a month wholesaling real estate. Now, obviously I have a big team, and that took a lot of time to build up. So if you're watching the video and you're like, how am I ever gonna get to where you're at? Look, it does take a little bit of time. This isn't something like is gonna happen overnight, right? When I got into the business at 18 years old, it took me time to close my first deal. As a matter of fact, it took me 9 months to close my first deal. So it wasn't like I was some like guru, like I didn't know what I was doing, right? Just like anybody else, I had to do trial and error, I had to fail a bunch of times, and I had to figure it out the hard way. And there wasn't a bunch of YouTubers back in the day like talking about how to do it step by step. So what I really encourage you to do is just get into the business and build it from scratch, build it from the ground up, and eventually you can figure out the things that you enjoy doing, the things you don't enjoy doing as much, and you can ultimately find people that can help you do it. And then of course, you can take the money you make with wholesaling real estate, and you can go ahead and you can explore other options in the real estate industry. Just go ahead and take it from me. I'm somebody that got started in wholesaling, and then I eventually got my real estate license and became a realtor, so I could kind of make money a couple of different ways. And then once I started really building up enough capital, what I decided to do was I decided to start taking some of the properties down myself and actually fixing and flipping them. And then of course, I got to a point where I would renovate properties and I would be like, wow, this is actually like a really nice property in like a really great area. Like, why don't I just keep this one as a rental property? And then that kind of evolved, and now we're looking at properties and I'm like, okay, like we just literally bought another property the other day where I looked at it and I was like, this would be a great Airbnb property. Literally in 85251, Scottsdale, Arizona, literally one of the best zip codes on the planet for Airbnb properties. I'm like, we were initially gonna wholesale it, and then I was like, well, we could make more money if we renovate it. So then we went down that rabbit hole. And then I was like, okay, well, we could actually like rent it out like long-term to like a long-term tenant. But then I looked at it again and I was like, wait, this would be like a phenomenal Airbnb property. So we're now doing the Airbnb business. And the reason I tell you that is not because like I'm anything special. Again, like it was just the natural evolution of kind of, going from wholesaling, again, to being a realtor, to fix and flipping, to rentals, to Airbnbs. And now my goal is to literally own hundreds of rental properties, right? I wanna own a bunch of Airbnbs. I wanna own, ultimately a bunch of fix and flip properties that I'm just constantly flipping and putting back on the market. And then of course, we're gonna continue to do the bread and the butter, which is obviously wholesaling real estate, which is essentially, again, we're just flipping the contract. So look, I think anybody going into 2021, this is a phenomenal way to get into the real estate industry, again, without a lot of cash, without a lot of good credit, without a lot of connections or, wisdom or knowledge in the industry, right? I think this is a great way, especially in 2021. As you guys know, we're in the middle of a pandemic. There's a ton of people, literally millions of people that are behind on their mortgage. There's millions of people that are about to be evicted, right? There's this big thing that's about to happen in 2021 where, it's my opinion that supply is gonna go up, demand is gonna go down, which means prices are essentially, in theory, gonna go down a little bit, and there will be more people in a distressed situation potentially in 2021 than there has been in a really long time, which will really allow people in the real estate investment world to actually make like a lot of money. And again, this is just like the cycle of life, right? So I just encourage you to make sure that you're positioned in such a way where you can, figure out how to make a little bit of money on the side. I mean, even if you did one deal a month, right? That could be an extra $5,000 to $10,000 a month on top of what you're making. So as you can tell, I'm super passionate about real estate. I'm passionate about wholesaling. I'm passionate about all things real estate. And if you have any questions, on how we do what we do, on how we do so much consistently every single month, definitely drop in the comment section below. I would love to answer all of your comments to help you out in any way I possibly can. Also, if you haven't already, I would really appreciate it if you would just smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm, okay? And also go check out my podcast link down below, my brand new podcast. We talk about how to make money, how to save money, how to invest your money, life, business. We interview cool people from all around the world. Definitely go check that out. I would really appreciate it. And I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video.